Welcome back to NewsX. I'm Thomas Porteous and you're tuned in to Focal Length, where we delve deep into the most pressing political and economic issues shaping our world today. Today in our segment, we will analyse the latest developments surrounding President Donald Trump and his ongoing influence on global affairs. President Trump's second term begins with bold moves, including a national energy emergency and support for far-right figures in Europe. We'll examine his impact on the global oil market, his ties with Nigel Farage, and implications for the UK. Trump's foreign policy, including his claim to be the global peacemaker, raises questions about his role in international diplomacy and its effects on politics at home and abroad. Joining us today for a discussion is Dr. Emmy Long, a distinguished expert in US legal and constitutional history. Dr. Long specialises in the US Supreme Court, the Bill of Rights, and critical issues like the intersection of religion and politics in America. Thank you for joining us, Dr. Emmy Long. My first question to you is, what are the key takeaways from President Trump's address following his inauguration?
Yeah, I think the message that Trump wanted to get across in the inaugural address and what he's done since is to say, I'm here, I'm back. We mean business. This is what we're going to do, and we're going to do this right from the start. There's no messing around. We're jumping right in and getting on with all of those things that we said we were going to do. And I think for supporters, that's about saying we promised you these things in the election and we keep our promises. And for those who are critics, sort of a way of saying, don't think that we're not going to do what we said we're going to do. If you oppose this, we are going to sort of fight you along the way. So I think the combination of the sort of the forcefulness and in some ways the belligerence of the speech, along with the flood of executive orders that came afterwards, is really about Trump rallying his base, rallying his supporters, making clear that they are doing what they said they would do, while at the same time beginning to make steps towards the bigger issues that the administration is going to have to deal with moving forward.
President Trump has issued an executive order imposing a national energy emergency. He has pushed for increased drilling of oil and gas in the US and exporting oil to other countries. How will this impact global oil prices?
Hard to say immediately. On one hand, it's possible that it might reduce global oil prices simply because if the United States is producing more, it's buying less. And if it's sending oil to other parts of the world, then they're also buying less. But then oil producing countries in response to that may simply choose to reduce their own production, which would keep prices high. So I think probably what we might see is a degree of instability in world oil prices for a little while, or at least if Trump does actually manage to get that oil out of American oil fields on tap relatively quickly, then we're going to see those prices fluctuate, and other oil producing companies discussing what they're going to do in response, because obviously if the prices go down, they're losing their income and they're not necessarily going to want to do that too.
Far-right leader Nigel Farage was invited to Trump's inauguration with endorsements from both Trump and Musk. How likely is this to impact UK politics?
Difficult to tell at the moment. British people know that Nigel Farage in particular has had connections with Donald Trump for quite some time. There was some suggestion for a while that the Starmer government might try and appoint Farage as the UK ambassador to the United States. I think that was coming from Farage and his supporters rather than any broader suggestions. That hasn't happened. But we've already seen that Elon Musk, for example, close to Trump, part of the new government department on efficiency, has been trying to play a role in British politics by commenting on events in the British political world on X, and causing repercussions there. So it's possible that any impact on British politics, at least initially, may come more from what's happening on social media than the connections that the politicians have. But in addition to Nigel Farage, former Prime Minister Boris Johnson was at the inauguration, and also Liz Truss. So again, they've had connections with Donald Trump for quite some time. But I think what they and Nigel Farage will be hoping is that having those connections with Donald Trump and being seen to be part of that broader circle will put them in a better position when it comes to the next elections here in the UK.
Do you find it odd that an invitation was not extended to Sir Keir Starmer?
Yes, it's a little strange, I think, that a sitting Prime Minister of the UK would not be invited to the inaugural when former Prime Ministers and Nigel Farage, who until relatively recently had never held elected office here in the UK, that they were there. But I don't think it's any surprise that there's tension between Keir Starmer and Donald Trump. They sit in different positions on the political spectrum. They have very different views of the world and certain issues in relation to international politics. So it's not likely to be an easy interpersonal relationship. So, we will see how that plays out as the governments have more to do with each other as the Trump administration really settles into the things that it's doing. But yes, I think it probably was a little bit of a surprise that Starmer wasn't invited, even if it's not necessarily surprising that he perhaps wouldn't have gone had he been invited.
Both Trump and Musk have been vocal about supporting far-right political parties in Germany, France, and the UK. Should this be considered foreign interference in other countries' electoral matters?
It's interesting when Trump and Elon Musk and others comment on politics that are happening in other parts of the world. They see that as sort of their right to comment on those things. And yet, when people from those countries around the world comment on American politics or about policies that are going on, that's seen as undue outside interference in the business of the United States. So I think there's a bit of a double standard going on there. It fits particularly with Trump's idea, I think, of America first. Sort of, we saw this in his inaugural address, the idea that American power and influence in the world gives them the right to do what it is they want, and the rest of the world is sort of going to have to go along with that or face the consequences of American power. Um, we'll see whether that continues. I think social media, as I suggested with Elon Musk, particularly using X to comment on events that are happening around the world, that gives him a huge platform. And since he's allied himself with the Trump administration, that also gives Trump a huge platform to be able to comment. So I think it's going to depend on how politicians and the media, for example, in those countries respond to anything that's said. If they simply go, oh, yes, that was said, we're going to ignore it because it's none of their business, it's likely to become less of a story. If politicians in those countries or the media take it up as a story, they're going to make it a bigger deal, I think. So I think some of the control of the impact of this is in the hands of the countries on which Trump and others comment. Maybe not all of it, but at least some of it is within their control.
The Gaza hostage deal was negotiated a day ahead of Trump's inauguration. Do you think Trump is more adept at finding solutions to global crises?
I think Trump's unpredictability has often given him leverage in international affairs in a way that perhaps more predictable politicians haven't. That doesn't necessarily make it a good thing, in that unpredictability can also cause instability if people aren't sure what position the United States is going to take, or they're not sure which direction things are going to go. But when it comes to the Israeli hostages being released from Gaza, it seems from the comments that have come from around that the combination of Joe Biden's negotiation, or him and his team's negotiation, along with some of the the understanding that when Trump came in, things were going to get a lot less predictable, seems to have had an impact on pushing the parties towards this agreement. We'll see if it holds, and if it does or it doesn't. We'll see what the Trump team's response is to this. But yeah, I think in some cases, Trump's unpredictability may be able to give him the opportunity to do things that other leaders might not.
Trump has stated that he wants to be the global peacemaker and a unifier of the world. Do you believe he will be able to resolve the Ukraine-Russia crisis?
Oh, it's hard to know. Trump as peacemaker doesn't necessarily sit easily with some of his rhetoric domestically, at least. But there's no doubt that in relation to his relationship with Vladimir Putin in Russia, for example, those are long-standing relationships, which perhaps will give him leverage. What we don't yet know, and what we're likely to see over the next few days and weeks, is what price Trump is going to push each side to pay in order to bring peace about in Ukraine, and whether that is a price that either side can live with. So it's not just about can you get people to the negotiating table or can you get them to agree. It's about what they have to compromise on to be able to do that. And Trump has been very very unclear about exactly what it is he was going to ask. Now, perhaps that's reasonable given that he was campaigning and that he wasn't in office yet. He certainly said that he would end the war on day one. We're on day one. It clearly hasn't happened. I don't think anybody really expected that was going to be the case. But it is going to be something that will occupy the American government for a little while, not least because there is some division over how much financial aid will go to Ukraine under the new administration, and that they have been quite heavily reliant on that aid. So we will see, and I think it's going to depend on a series of stages, and we'll see as it unfolds over the next few weeks.
How are Trump's tariff policies likely to impact Europe, particularly the UK?
The United States is a big market for both the UK and the European Union. If Trump decides to place fairly heavy tariffs on both of those regions of the world and both of the economies, that is almost certainly going to have some kind of impact. It'll depend on what the tariffs are on and what the size of the tariffs happen to be. I think the EU and the UK will be very keen to try and avoid tariffs completely if that's possible, or keep them to a minimum if it's not. They're like other parts of the world. The EU economy and the British economy, they're not quite as tied as they were. Both economies have had their problems in recent years. We're still feeling here in the UK the effects of the inflation that Americans were feeling, which in part led to Donald Trump's election. So any kind of tariff policy that risks the possibility of that inflation coming back is something that the government is going to be concerned about and looking to avoid. We still don't yet know what the details of any possible tariffs will be. So the exact implications are not yet known. But I suspect that the UK and the EU are going to be looking very closely, because any kind of tariff is going to have an adverse impact on their economic well-being that they probably can't afford at this point.
Thank you, Dr. Emma Long, for speaking to us on Focal Length. With that, it's a wrap on this episode. For more international news updates, stay tuned on NewsX.